Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. You're watching Eagle News International. On today's headlines. President Marcos Jr. stated that the recently acquired missile system by the Philippine Navy enhances the country's defense capabilities, particularly in countering air attacks, amidst a dynamically changing security environment in the region. Today, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen reaffirmed her commitment to preserving peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Despite mounting military pressure from China, Tsai emphasized that war is not an option in addressing the tense situation. The United States has announced that it will allow its Western allies to supply Ukraine with advanced fighter jets, including American-made F-16s. The move is a major boost for Ukraine, which has been fighting a war against Russia since February last year. And Harrison Ford gets emotional looking back at his career during a press conference for his latest Indiana Jones movie, premiering at the Cannes Film Festival. First in our news, President Marcos Jr. stated that the recently acquired missile system by the Philippine Navy enhances the country's defense capabilities, particularly in countering air attacks. This amidst a dynamically changing security environment in the region. The president also reiterated the government's commitment to modernizing the military. He said that the modernization program is necessary to ensure that the Philippines has the capabilities to defend itself against any threats. Let's listen in.
With the fluid security situation in our region, it is imperative that the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and of course the Navy, is substantially equipped, trained, and always on alert to respond to any and all exigencies that may confront our nation. It is for this prime reason that we exert a continuous effort to strengthen the capacity of our armed forces. Through strategic acquisitions and asset upgrading, we provide our armed forces with the wherewithal to be more effective in its solemn and sworn duty to defend our people and territory and advance Philippine national interest.
This is our first anti-air missile capability, and previously we did not have this type of weapon, but slowly, because of our modernization program, we are acquiring this cutting-edge technology at par with the other navies in the world. Ang mga missile system na ito ay nakakabit sa ating mga frigates, and presently we have 2 Jose Rizal class frigates. So kasama ito sa pagpatrolya sa ating mga karagatan. When the ship goes to patrol the West Philippine Sea, kasama yung missile system na ito. This demonstrates our improved capabilities to protect our waters, our maritime environment, and we hope that we continue with our modernization program so that we can acquire other capabilities we need to perform our mandate better.
Now, the president participated in the Philippine Navy's capability demonstration held in San Antonio, Zambales, observing the successful test firing of the newly acquired defense and other weapon system. The president's statements come at a time when the Philippines is facing a number of security challenges, including the rise of China's military power and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The exercises and the modernization program are signs that the Philippines is committed to strengthening its defense capabilities and deterring potential threats. In other news, a Pacific Islands leader called on the United States and China to not bring adversarial competition to the region as the rival powers intensify their bids for influence. Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown, invited to represent the region at a group of G7 summit at Hiroshima, told AFP that increased superpower interest in the Pacific was welcome but could not come at any cost. Take a look.
So the announcement by the US to re-engage in the Pacific was met with welcome by the Pacific Island countries. We had the summit with the US President last year, and we welcomed that engagement into the region. What we don't want to see is our region being an area of adversarial competition by our development partners. We want our region to be an area of collaboration.
In recent years, China has dramatically ramped up its economic, political, and military footprint in the strategic ocean region. Beijing has snapped up mines and ports across the Pacific and inked a secretive security pact with the Solomon Islands that allows China to deploy troops to the country. The U.S. fears that a Chinese military foothold in the South Pacific could outflank its facilities on Guam and make defense of Taiwan more complicated. The self-ruled democratic island lives under constant threat of an invasion by China, which claims Taiwan as part of its territory to be seized one day by force if necessary. U.S. President Joe Biden has said the U.S. would defend the island in the event of a Chinese invasion. Washington has opened or reopened a string of Pacific Island embassies and deployed a steady stream of envoys to court island leaders. Today, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen reaffirmed her commitment to preserving peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, despite mounting military pressure from China. President Tsai emphasized that war is not an option in addressing the tense situation. Let's listen in.
现在全球的共识很清楚，就是台海议题必须和平解决，战争不是选项，任何一方都不能以非和平的方式片面改变现状。我们不挑衅，不冒进，也绝不会在压力底下屈服。
Throughout her 2 terms as president, Taiwan, a self-governing island, has experienced increased incursions by Chinese warplanes and ships. China asserts its territorial claim over Taiwan and has not ruled out using force to achieve reunification. During the G7 summit in Hiroshima, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida announced that the leaders of the Group of 7 or G7 countries affirmed their commitment to pursuing a peaceful resolution to issues concerning Taiwan. President Tsai highlighted that Taiwan officials are currently engaged in discussions with the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden regarding the provisions of $500 million worth of weapons aid to Taiwan. U.S. health officials announced that an atypical case of mad cow disease, also known as bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE, has been detected in a beef cow at a slaughter plant in South Carolina. In a statement released on Friday, the U.S. Department of Agriculture assured that the animal never entered the food supply chain and posed no risk to human health or the safety of the food supply in the country. The agency emphasized that the U.S. has a negligible risk status for bovine spongiform encephalopathy, commonly known as mad cow disease, and expects no trade impacts due to this finding. It is worth noting that BSE is associated with a fatal human condition known as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, but the atypical variant found in older cattle is less concerning than the classic form, which spreads through contaminated meat and bone meal. Now, this marks the 7th time BSE has been identified in the U.S. in the past 2 decades, with the majority of cases being atypical. Authorities in the Western Canadian province of Alberta, battling devastating wildfires, have closed 12 local parks now ahead of the long holiday weekend, fearing fresh flames. Alberta has declared a state of emergency and asked for foreign aid, with more than 800,000 hectares of land destroyed in fires and thousands of people evacuated since the beginning of this month. Thomas I. Likeness for the report.
The call for other countries to help out came from Canada's Public Safety Minister Bill Blair. Blair is asking the U.S., Mexico, Australia, and New Zealand to send what help they can. The fires began burning in the oil-producing province of Alberta. Since then, they've spread to neighboring British Columbia and Saskatchewan.
There are 91 wildfires in the forest protection area of Alberta. 27 of those are out of control. So far this year, we've responded to 485 wildfires, burning more than 728,000 hectares. Winds have weakened today across most of the province, and temperatures are near normal for this time of year. But things will start to change tomorrow. It will get hotter and drier as we head to the weekend, and as we've seen, that can lead to more active wildfire behavior.
On Wednesday, a smoky haze blocked out the sun in many parts of Alberta. People were told to avoid being outdoors because poor air quality posed a health risk.
This support is critical to those Albertans who are facing immeasurable stress and uncertainty from these wildfires. Unfortunately, the hot and dry weather continues and the conditions for wildfires remain extremely volatile. The fire danger is extreme in the northern part of Alberta, with hot, dry, windy conditions expected to persist in the coming days. Our number one priority is that we fight these fires and we deal with the extreme fire conditions in order to protect human lives. It's important that we are all doing our part to support these efforts. That includes being mindful of the fire risks that are upcoming this long weekend as temperatures are expected to climb again. It will be critical to avoid any activities that might start new fires or make the current situation worse. Smoke also continues to be an issue affecting air quality and visibility right throughout Alberta. A special air quality statement remains in place for most of the province, with many areas still sitting above 10 on the air quality index. Keep in mind that a number of 10 or higher indicates extremely poor air quality.
Forests are tinder dry from high temperatures and a lack of rain. Strong winds are spreading the flames, and lightning strikes could spark even more blazes. As the region gets ready to celebrate a holiday weekend, a weekend that marks the beginning of the summer camping season, plans for outdoor activities will likely be scaled back. There's a ban on campfires, and with smoke-filled air and fires burning near many parks, people will likely opt to stay home. Thomas I. Lightness, Eagle News, Edmonton, Canada. We live in extraordinary times.
In western Spain, a wildfire has ravaged some 3,000 hectares of forest and scrubland and forced the evacuation of 700 people from several villages. Take a look.
La verdad, porque llevamos fuera desde ayer, desde esta madrugada sobre las 4:30 aproximadamente. Nos avisaron rápido, pusieron un bando para que la gente saliese rápido, evacuaron desde la plaza hacia abajo y a partir de ahí nada, nos evacuaron a Moraleja, pero fatal. O sea, hemos venido ahora para ver si había mejorado la cosa, pero resulta que ha ido a peor. Así que la verdad es que la gente está bastante mal.
Local authorities blame arson for the blaze, which broke out on Wednesday near the village of Pino Franqueado in the sparsely populated region of Extremadura, bordering Portugal. Spain, which is experiencing long-term drought after 3 years of below-average rainfall, has already experienced multiple wildfires this year. The drought was made worse by an unusually early heat wave at the end of April that brought exceptionally high temperatures normally only seen in summer across much of the country. The mercury hit 38.8 degrees Celsius or 101.8 degrees Fahrenheit in the southern city of Granada on April 27, the hottest temperature ever recorded in mainland Spain during that month. Hanging from helicopters, firefighters evacuating people from their homes in flooded-stricken parts of Italy as the death toll rises to 14, according to local authorities. Take a look. Now, more than 20 rivers burst their banks in Italy, and it forced thousands from their homes after 6 months' worth of rainfall fell in a day and a half. The recent floods in Italy have caused widespread damage and loss of life. Many are warning that the country needs a national plan to respond to the effects of climate change. Civil Protection Minister Nelio Musumeci said that tropical conditions had already reached Italy with 20 centimeters of rain falling in 36 hours and in some areas up to 50 centimeters. He also said that soils that remain dry for a long time end up becoming cemented, drastically limiting their capacity to absorb water. He also said that no regional dams had been built for 40 years and that a new approach to hydraulic engineering was now needed. Experts have been warning that extreme weather phenomena are becoming the norm as a result of human-induced climate change. A 7.1 magnitude earthquake struck the Pacific Ocean to the east of New Caledonia on Saturday, according to the USGS. The quake was followed by a 6.5 magnitude aftershock minutes later. Take a look. The epicenter of this earthquake was located about 300 kilometers east of New Caledonia at a depth of 35 kilometers. There were no immediate reports of damage or injuries. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said there was no threat of a tsunami from the earthquake. Now, this earthquake comes a day after a 7.7 magnitude quake struck the same area. That quake sent people scrambling for higher grounds on several Pacific islands, but a tsunami warning was lifted hours later. The recent earthquakes are a reminder of the seismic activity that is common in the Pacific region. The region is home to the Ring of Fire, a horseshoe-shaped area of volcanoes and earthquakes that encircles the Pacific Ocean. The Ring of Fire is caused by the movement of tectonic plates, which are large pieces of the Earth's crust that move around on the surface of the Earth. When tectonic plates collide, they can cause earthquakes and eruption of volcanoes. The U.S. has announced that it'll allow its Western allies to supply Ukraine with advanced fighter jets, including American-made F-16s. The move is a major boost for Ukraine, which has been fighting a war against Russia since February 24 last year. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan insisted the fighter jet decision did not reflect an about-turn in U.S. policy. Take a look.
Nothing has changed. In fact, our approach to the provision of weapons, material, training to the Ukrainians has followed the exigencies of the conflict. So in the first phase, when Russian forces were bearing down on Kyiv, the key capability they needed were Stingers and Javelins. We provided them. In the second phase, when it was more of a ground fight in the Donbass, the need was artillery and M777's 155 ammunition. As the fight has evolved, the capabilities that we have provided Ukraine have evolved. And what the president was really getting at back in February is that we were in the midst of a massive effort to ensure that Ukraine would have what it needed to be able to launch this counteroffensive this summer. And that was everything from tanks to Bradley fighting vehicles to further HIMARS and artillery ammunition, other capabilities. F-16s are not part of that mix, and the president was indicating that for the purposes of this counteroffensive, the F-16 capabilities compared with everything else I said was not at the top of the list. But now that we have delivered everything we said we were going to deliver, so we put the Ukrainians in a position to make progress on the battlefield through the counteroffensive, we've reached a moment where it is time to look down the road and to say, what is Ukraine going to need as part of a future force to be able to deter and defend against Russian aggression as we go forward. F-16's fourth-generation fighter aircraft are part of that mix. The obvious first step there is to do the training and then to work with allies and partners and the Ukrainians to determine how to do the actual provision of planes as we move forward.
Now, Sullivan also denied providing the planes would further escalate the conflict and said Ukraine has pledged that no U.S. military equipment will be used for attacks inside Russia. The decision to provide F-16s to Ukraine is likely to be met with a negative reaction from Russia. The Kremlin has repeatedly warned the West against providing Ukraine with advanced weapons, and it's possible that Russia could retaliate against the U.S. and its allies. However, the U.S. has said that it is prepared to face any retaliation from China. The provision of F-16s to Ukraine is a major development in the conflict. It's a sign that the U.S. is committed to helping Ukraine defend itself against Russia, and it could help to tip the balance of the war in Ukraine's favor. The U.S. and its G7 allies rolled out new sanctions against Russia's war machine, targeting Moscow's lucrative diamond trade and more entities linked to the invasion of Ukraine. Leaders from the group of 7 wealthy democracies are meeting in Hiroshima with Russia's $4 to $5 billion annual trade in diamonds in the crosshairs.
We will restrict trade in Russian diamonds. Russian diamonds are not forever, and we will lay out openly and frankly why these sanctions are necessary and justified. Russian propaganda is built on lies and conspiracy. we are fighting back with the facts and figures. I have the impression it is very important to work on the traceability, and it's what we need to do, to put a system in place that will be efficient, because we all know that the challenge is to make sure with our sanctions that we are painful against Russia, not against ourselves. This is systematically the principle that we have tried to put in place, being painful against Russia in order to curb Russia's war machine, not to be painful on ourselves. And
Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine 15 months ago has prompted waves of sanctions that have helped plunge his country into recession and drained the Kremlin's war chest. The G7 is now looking to tighten the screws further, strengthening existing sanctions, closing loopholes, and subjecting more Russian firms and their international partners to punitive restrictions. EU member state Belgium is moving the largest wholesale buyers of Russian diamonds, along with India and the United Arab Emirates. The United States is a major end market for the finished product. And as the G7 countries meet in Hiroshima, possible sanctions against Russia, against Russian diamond imports, as we heard there, are now on the table. And according to Cohen van den Bemt, professor of economics and diamond trade specialist, this measure will have little impact on Russia. Take a look.
Diamonds. But once a rough diamond is polished, it's very difficult to decide or to determine the origin of the diamond. And as such, this is one of the loopholes, which I think if you want to have effective sanctions in place, you need to close. And that's not an easy one. Are they effective? Yeah. So what will happen basically is probably they will not pass through Antwerp anymore. This large trade will just move to Dubai, and from Dubai to India or directly to India. Typically countries, yes, that will not and probably never impose sanctions on Russia. So once they are polished in India, yeah, it will be very difficult to see that or to determine the origin of this diamond. So what we need basically, and that's something I've not seen yet, is that there is an effective sanction imposed that ensures traceability. And I really think the only possibility is a technological solution, but that technology solution, I mean, it's far from being implemented. It's not something which is on the shelf you can put everywhere and then check on these diamonds.
Can you explain to me how
the Antwerp diamond market will become less liquid, less interesting, but which is worse is that the trade flow will just go to Dubai, yes, and to India directly, and nothing will change for Russia as such, unless...
Meanwhile, the G7 today will agree on a common set of tools to combat economic coercion and limit the risk that high-tech exports to China undermine national security, according to a top official. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters at the G7 summit in Hiroshima that the measures will focus on more resilient supply chains for G7 countries, which rely heavily on China in some sectors.
Now, turning to today, a big focus of today will be on economic security. The G7 leaders will outline a common set of tools to address concerns that each of our countries face, including from economic coercion and from efforts at the intersection of technology and national security to undermine our collective interests and our collective security. These tools, these economic security tools, will include steps to build resilience in our supply chains. They will also include steps to protect sensitive technology, like export controls and outbound investment measures. The communiqué will reflect is a statement of key elements on which all G7 countries are aligned when it comes to dealing with the PRC. The communiqué will note that each country has its own independent relationship and approach, but we are united and aligned around a set of common elements, and it will walk through those elements. And it will indicate that we do seek to cooperate with China on matters of mutual interest, and also that we will work to address our significant concerns that we have with China in a range of areas. we are, as President Biden has said, as I have said, as others have said, and to borrow a phrase from the European Union itself, looking to de-risk, not decouple from China.
As heavy fighting continues across Sudan, UN humanitarians warned that more than 1 million people have now been forced to flee for their lives. A wave of deadly attacks has also targeted West Darfur's capital, El Geneina, in recent days, while the UN World Health Organization said that more than 700 people had been killed, nearly 5,300 injured nationwide after 5 weeks of clashes. From the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, spokesperson Matthew Saltmarsh described the horrendous fighting on the ground with shelling and bombing attacks. Take a look.
Over a month since the fighting have started, we're making an urgent appeal for the safety of civilians and to allow humanitarian aid to move into Sudan as we continue to scale up our response for the over 1 million people who have now been recorded as displaced within Sudan or to neighboring countries.
Overall, 5,287 injuries, 705 deaths. Khartoum State, 3,254 injuries, 203 deaths.
Over 843,000 people have been internally displaced within the country, according to the IOM, with neighbouring governments and UNHCR having recorded almost 250,000 crossing borders today. The numbers of those fleeing to Egypt, which is the largest host, are rapidly increasing. And with partners, we estimate that the numbers currently are around 5,000 every day arrivals. That makes a total of almost 110,000 Sudanese who have entered the country, according to the government.
Now, under the accord reached in Saudi Arabia over a week ago, Sudan's National Army and rival RSF militia agreed to allow trapped civilians to leave combat zones and allow humanitarian aid to enter. Sudan's neighboring countries continue to be affected by the conflict, especially South Sudan, Chad, and particularly Egypt, which currently hosts the largest number of Sudanese, with 5,000 arriving every day. In other news, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said that the central bank may not have to raise interest rates as high as previously thought to control inflation due to strains in the banking sector. Speaking at a monetary conference in Washington, D.C., Mr. Powell noted that the Fed's initiatives to deal with problems at mid-sized banks have largely prevented the worst-case scenarios from happening. However, he warned that the problems at Silicon Valley Bank and other banks could still have a ripple effect on the economy. Take a look.
While the financial stability tools help to calm conditions in the banking sector, developments there, on the other hand, are contributing to tighter credit conditions and are likely to weigh on economic growth, hiring, and inflation. So as a result, our policy rate may not need to rise as much as it would have otherwise to achieve our goals. Of course, the extent of that is highly uncertain. So I graduated from college in 1975 during what we now call the Great Inflation, and same college year as Ben. And I started working as a lawyer in the financial sector in the late 1970s. I recall from that time a growing sense that high inflation was essentially a permanent part of the landscape, just something that we all had to accept and deal with, and that the costs of getting rid of it were too high. So you just were getting used to it. Of course, ultimately, the Fed did step up and restore price stability. And one lesson from that era is that price stability is really the foundation of a strong economy, and that the economy doesn't work for anyone without price stability. Another is that high inflation when we have high inflation, it is the responsibility and the obligation of the central bank to restore and sustain price stability. So today, while inflation isn't as high as it was when I was in college, it's nonetheless far above our 2% objective, and many people are currently experiencing high inflation for the first time in their lives. It's not a headline to say that they really don't like it. So we are very aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it reduces purchasing power, especially for those who are at the margins of the economy and living paycheck to paycheck and need to use all of their incoming income to pay for food, housing, and transportation and other essentials. And that's why the committee is so strongly committed to returning to our 2% goal.
On balance, Powell said that inflation is still too high. He added that the Fed will continue to monitor the situation closely and will take action as needed to bring down inflation to its 2% target. Several stories from Thomas I. Likeness today, from a new hunting trophy law in South Africa to a Nigerian chef setting a new world record. These and more on Correspondent at Large.
And now news and commentary from around the globe. Taxidermists in South Africa upset with a new law in the United Kingdom. It bans the import of hunting trophies. Trophy hunting has long been controversial. You know, hunters sometimes pay thousands of dollars for the right to kill big game animals. Animals like elephants, lions, and so on. They have the carcasses stuffed and mounted, then they display them back home. For people like 45-year-old Elias Petsasai, who works at a taxidermy firm, the ban is going to hurt.
If they're going to ban this job, it's going to cost a lot to me, because they're going to not manage to feed my family everything. Because for me, I think all of us here working here as the workers, we're get to survive from these things.
But he's not getting any sympathy from SPCA spokeswoman Keshfi Nair.
I think in terms of ethics and morals, to hunt an animal not need to be mounted on your wall. I think it's a little bit questionable and a little bit unethical.
Defenders of big game hunting say they're simply culling animals to curb overpopulation. But critics say they're endangering the survival of some species. Man's inhumanity to man has increased, according to a new report from Amnesty International. The agency says executions increased by 53% in the past 12 months. Death penalty expert Sierra San Giorgio says the number of executions last year is the highest figure recorded since 2017. And she points the finger at Iran and Saudi Arabia.
We saw an increase in the number of executions in Iran of 83% compared to 2021. And in Saudi Arabia, the total number of executions that we recorded tripled compared to the previous year. We also had, for example, a chilling example of the senseless use of the death penalty when we saw 81 people being executed in one day in Saudi Arabia.
On a positive note, she says last year, 6 countries abolished the death penalty. There's a new name in the Guinness Book of Records, Hilda Bassi. She's a chef in Nigeria, and she set a new record for the longest cooking marathon by an individual. Hilda put on her apron on May the 11th, and until May 15th, she prepared more than 200 meals, served to about 4,000 people. She did this non-stop. She cooked continuously for 100 hours and 40 minutes. That's more than 13 hours longer than the previous record holder. The dishes she prepared were all Nigerian food, and she hopes that Nigerian recipes will become better known worldwide.
One of my biggest goals is I want Nigerian recipes to be propagated across the world. You know, I want it to be a normal thing to make egusi soup in an American home. I want you to be able to walk into any random supermarket and find Nigerian ingredients.
The 27-year-old chef has big dreams. She says she wants to expand her restaurant, even franchise it to other parts of the world. I gotta wonder, though, what she's making for dinner tonight. I'll be back in 7 days, and in the meantime, I wish you all peace, joy, and happiness in the ensuing week. Thomas I. Likeness, Correspondent at Large, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Harrison Ford gets emotional looking back at his career during a press conference for his latest Indiana Jones movie premiering at the Cannes Film Festival. Take a look.
To see a good movie. I wanted to see a good movie. I wanted to see a completion of the 5 films. I wanted to round out the story. I wanted to see this man who depended so much on his youth and the vigor of youth. I wanted to see the weight of life on him. I wanted to see him require reinvention. Everything has come together to support me in my old age. And I love the work. So I just want to work. And I want to tell stories, good stories. And I have been so lucky in my life to have that opportunity.
Last part. Can you ride a horse? Which you did, right there on screen. Yeah.
Let me tell you, yeah, I can ride a horse. If they let me. Thank you I didn't mean to be cruel. No. I forgot everything up to ride a horse.
Well, she also asked how you stay in shape, but Mads kind of answered that with his Olympian story. So,
which is...
Well, you lying?
But very kind.
So you just brought the bike for fun?
There's a partial truth there, but look, I've been blessed with this body.
Now, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny sees the archaeologists defy age with special effects and fight off Nazis from Manhattan to Sicily. But he struggled against critics in Cannes on Friday. Ford, who has vowed this will be the last time he dons the famous fedora, showed a rare bit of emotion when the Cannes Film Festival presented him with an honorary Palme d'Or on stage the previous night ahead of this premiere. The 5th outing has Ford joined by Phoebe Waller-Bridge as his witty and more sprightly sidekick, with Mads Mikkelsen as a villainous Nazi scientist. The series began back in 1981 with Raiders of the Lost Ark and was followed shortly after by 2 hugely popular sequels.
A dial that could change the course of history.
Why are you chasing the thing that drove your father crazy?
Don't move.
We need to get out of here. Stop! Sorry.
Helena! Dr. Jones, get him. Hitler made mistakes, and with this, I will correct them all.
You stole it.
Then you stole it.
And then I stole it. It's called capitalism.
Fasten your seatbelt. There might be some turbulence.
You've taken your chances, made your mistakes, and now a final triumph.
Your father. Sorry! Well, I've been looking for this all my life.
As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angela. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.